and to the devotees, and especially the younger generation was very involved in helping the younger generation. So we'll take turns in sharing memories, and there's people who live in different parts of the country who also want to share their memories. So we're going to start, I think, with Kunti, okay? And then after that, Kunti was the wife of Sarva Satya for how many years?
25.
25 years, okay. All right.
Well, blessings to everyone. I ask that my Savior, Jesus Christ, anoints my words with love and peace and joy and truth. And I thank you so much. When I was praying this morning about this, I was asking the Lord, can I have a word, please? That will be a blessing. And I just heard one word, and it was loyalty. And I think that really describes Sarva Satya. He was a very loyal person. He didn't always quite grasp the way to go. He had some brain damage, which you know about. Yeah, he was hit by an RPG during the Second Tet Offensive in 1968, and then he was a prisoner of war before that. He was a mess. When I met him in Hawaii, and Rishi wanted me to tell some of this is your fault. When I met him in Hawaii, he was in Maya, and I was a heathen, and I was camped out on McKenna Beach on Maui, and there was this man. I won't say how undressed he was, but we'll just say, and he was wearing a thread, okay, and some kind of beanie, and he was out there chanting, and I thought he's weird. But we became friends, and he taught me how to body surf. He was really good at that, so we got that one done, all right? Okay, and then his best friend over there, Pranarishi Das, we met, and we toured the islands basically in a pacer. Does anyone remember the AMC Pacers? They looked like spaceships. The three of us living in the car with a Newfoundland dog. Does anyone know what a Newfie is like? 125 pounds of animal. And Steve made some kind of a closet out of a box. He was not a carpenter at the time, and it leaked on top of the car, so we had some place to put our backpacks. And we would go backpacking and having adventures, and one in particular you wanted me to tell about was at the Hanakapiai Trail on Kauai. Anyone familiar with the islands besides you, the Hawaiian people? Yeah, okay. So there in the Bible, John, the book of John 15:13, there is a verse that says, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for a friend." So we're going up this very slippery trail. It's wet. There's a sheer drop-off with, how many? 2,000 feet? Maybe 3,000 feet to lava rock and Pacific Ocean. I think I was first, then you were after me, and then he was third. Right? Is that the order? Yeah. Okay, because I had to remember. Okay, so we're going along, and all of a sudden I heard, whoa! And I look back, and there is my husband sliding towards the edge. And this guy, Pranarishi, all I see is he has turned, he's swiveled around, he's down on his fanny with his heels dug in, and he grabbed Sarva's backpack, and they're both sliding towards the edge. Steve was wearing a murdunga, and I thought, okay. I got down on my fanny, dug in my heels, and grabbed the murdunga strap, and so we're like a train headed towards the edge. And don't let me exaggerate, but didn't his heels hit the edge? You don't remember? Well, I might be exaggerating, but let me. So his heels hit the edge, and we stopped. So you went on, Steve went on, Rishi went on to go to the falls. I never did get to see them because Sarva said, I'm done, and we camped for the night. And anyway, that was just one of our little adventures. So I'm kind of telling another side of his life. He hiked Haleakala, 3 times? He was very, okay, there's another word. There's another word out of the book of Proverbs. Prabhupada used to quote Proverbs quite a lot. It's chapter 18, verse 24. One who has unreliable friends comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And that's the kind of loyalty that I think Sarva had, and that you two shared. And then I have to also say that towards, am I supposed to tell his beginning?
I'd like to hear it.
Okay, he was born in Brooklyn to a Sicilian family, very close, large family, always the sauce on the stove, and then he met Prabhupada very early, I think 1968, got involved in the movement even though he was still in the military. And he didn't go AWOL, although he was tempted to. He did go to Vietnam. He served one tour. Now, before that, he had been, I went to his concert in Detroit, the Blues Magoos. Ain't got nothing yet. No, we ain't got nothing yet. I don't know if you remember that. It was on the radio, top 10. My parents didn't want me to go to his concert, but I was like, wow, they're so cool. And so he was the bass player, and his son is a bass player, a wonderful bass player. And he used to do the lead in the songs with the bass, which was a bum 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 bum. Anyway, let's see. So when he got shot and he was imprisoned, the prison was not a prison. He never got to the actual building. The way he told this story to me, and I guess it's true, is, but you never really know, is that he was a lieutenant, and he had a small, group of men, a little platoon or something. I'm not a military person. And they were going into Cambodia, and they were kind of fishing around for where the weapons were coming through, the arms were coming through from North to South Vietnam via Cambodia. So they were radioing back some of this information, and they got nailed. And so the Viet Cong imprisoned them, which involved stripping them and beating them with rattan. They would hang them by their feet over the water so that they couldn't escape, and it was horrific. And his torturer told him that he was going to beat his leg so badly he would never walk again. Well, I told you about Haleakala 3 times. Anyway, what happened is they were going another slippery slope trail. Am I taking too long? Okay. The guard in front of them slipped and tripped and fell, and Sarva was chained to another prisoner, and they wrapped the chain around the guy and killed him. And then they just kind of turned around and went back down the mountain trail. I have to say, he had a great sense of direction. I loved being with the man. He was never lost. And he found his way back to South Vietnam, but it was during a firefight. There was a Second Tet Offensive going on, and he lost his mind, raised his hand, "We're here!" And was hit by friendly fire. An RPG took off his arm, gave him a lot of injuries, including a right frontal traumatic craniotomy, which controlled his ability to control his temper. And killed the other guys that he was with. He was loaded into a helicopter, and hospital. Years later, he just decided just to go to Maui and eat fruit and try to recover. And that's when I met him. Okay, let me see. Am I wandering? Huh?
No, I said no, thank you for sharing.
Oh, okay. Well, he decided it was time for him to get out of Maya, time for me to get saved, and so we went to Nuana Valley, joined the temple there, and I better leave some stuff out. We had to leave in a hurry. wound up going back to Florida, went to the University of Florida for 4 years because he had benefits, and then he worked for the BBT, and then Mukunda Maharaj said, I want you guys to do the newspaper, and we're going like, what newspaper? It's called ISKCON World Review. So, okay, so we did that for 13 years. It changed to Hare Krishna World. I love doing it. I quit suddenly because of some revelations that came about because of our second generation. And I got into a hoo-hoo with leadership, but we'll leave that. And that was the end of my marriage because the man was loyal. I was not. I said, I'm out of here. By then you were grown, you were on your own. I thought now's a good time for me to exit stage right, which I did. But I have to tell you, we were married for 25 years, and I thought I would last a lifetime. I have to say that he showed me some grace, even though he had some issues. He had PTSD. Anyone who's known a veteran knows the struggles that they have. Plus the brain damage, let's not forget that. Plus he'd lost so much. He couldn't play the guitar anymore. But whatever he could do, he did with his whole heart. And I guess that's a good way to end. He was a wholehearted person. Through our son, we reconciled eventually. We forgave each other for me splitting, him being... forgiveness is a beautiful thing. I got one more verse. Out of the book of James, chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, says, My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various temptations, challenges, knowing that the trying of your faith works patience, patient endurance, perseverance. And let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting, lacking nothing. So,
Thank you so much. Kanchi.
that's it.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Damodar, is there anyone online we should hear from? And we'll try to keep it to 5 minutes max, just because we have more people to hear from. Okay, KD, you go next. And then maybe they can go after that.
So I'm KD, I'm Sarva's son. I go by KD, but it's Krishna Das, obviously. I met my dad when I was about 8 years old in Miami. This is prior, I don't know if everybody knows, but I was adopted by him and my mother. But prior to being adopted, I actually met him in Miami. And I remember very well, I had seen him around the temple, and there in the temple, it used to be, I think it had like 9 floors, so there was an elevator that went up and down. And I was a little kid, so I would just get in the elevator and just ride up and down and, have an adventure. One day I got in, and there was Sarva right there. And back then he was still pretty healthy. He was standing really tall. He was missing his arm, obviously, and it was something to look at. Especially as a little boy, it's just like, wow, who's this guy? He was loud. Obviously, he's a very boisterous individual, and being a 9-year-old boy, I asked him, how did you lose your arm? And he said, well, Krishna Das, I lost it in a great battle. He said, he told me there was swords, and one of the guys took it off with his sword. And to me, I was like, wow, he told me it was a battle like Kurukshetra. And I always thought that was really funny. I mean, obviously I didn't totally believe it, but at the same time, like, maybe it is true, I don't know. But then he told me later on that it was a war that he was in, and that's how he lost his own. I also, at that time, knew that he was very proud of his Macintosh computers. This in the 80s, when the Mac first came out, and it was the biggest thing you can have in your home. So I got to know that he had the computer, and about a year later, next thing you know, him and my mom were adopting me, and it was one of the best things that ever happened to my life to be raised by both of them. Immediately after being adopted, he took on the role of a father to me, to teach me how to do things. And even though he couldn't physically show me, he was very patient with me. He described everything, using the first week I was with him, I changed the washer out of a sink, took the faucet off with a screwdriver, picked up a wrench for the first time, took it off, took the washer, I described where all these parts were, put it back together, and voila, the sink wasn't leaking anymore. After that, it was a skill saw, changing a tire, all of these type of things that, fathers show their sons how to do. But he did it without physically actually showing me, which was amazing, because how he did it was just to describe everything and be very patient. He didn't yell at me. He didn't get frustrated with me when I, being a kid, not being frustrated. I don't want to do this. Not being strong enough to pull the wrench tight, loose. He would say, stop. You're okay. You can do it. You have the strength to do it. And I did it. And I was always grateful for that, because that instilled confidence in me to for all the other challenges in my life later on growing up. No, he didn't teach me bass. He told me a little bit about his days in the band. That was another thing that he instilled with me. Whenever, as a kid, I would go with him to the post office to help him with the mail and with the groceries. I was his right arm. He would play music in the car, and we would listen to it, and I got curious about the music. He would tell me, this is the great band Led Zeppelin and all these other bands that he would listen to. So he definitely exposed me to a lot of music, which which allowed me to evolve my own music appreciation in life. Obviously, he told me about the band. He said, this is a couple pictures of him and his band.
I actually just watched that video the other day on YouTube. It was posted, and I think I was like maybe 8 or 9 years old the last time I watched it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was great. Throughout the years, he was always very generous with me and with everybody that he got around him. Growing up, I remember my house was always an open door for people to come in and out as they needed. If they just needed a meal, a place to stay, somebody to listen to them, counseling, he was always there. I would always walk in, and there would be somebody there with my mom and my dad talking with them, or my mom would offer them food, and if they needed a place to stay, they could stay there. And that continued on even after my parents split up. With his new family, he always had an open door with them. Always generous with everybody that he met. Whether it was, sometimes it was money, sometimes it was just an ear, if there's somebody a shoulder for somebody to talk to. And he was very kind to everybody. He, unfortunately, as he got older, his physical disabilities started to become more apparent. In around 2010, I had gotten divorced from my first wife, and I found myself kind of resetting. I also just recovered from leukemia, and I had to kind of physically, mentally, and emotionally reset myself from a lot of things. And it just so happens that's when my dad was really struggling with physically and with a lot of things in his life. So I was able to the opportunity was there for me to help him and to really start taking care of him, and took over his finances and trying to find care for him, which was a huge adventure on its own, dealing with all these things and all kind of new things, dealing with the VA and the banks and lawyers and all kind of stuff like that. Was challenging. But once again, through him,
you did an amazing job.
Thank you. But once again, through him, he was teaching me again another aspect of life, which has always come in handy. With even now, it's all of these things have always just kept going with him. He's always taught me to do things Once he went into Riverwood, to the facility in Stark, it was harder to see him there because he couldn't get up anymore, he couldn't walk anymore. But, I did my best to go there on a weekly basis to do whatever I could for him. But he was always, like I think somebody mentioned earlier, he was always very positive. I never went there where he was feeling depressed or down or anything. He'd come in and smile at me, hey, Haribo, how you doing? And we'd greet together and we'd talk. I'd give him a pizza or some prasadam, or we'd watch the football game, and he was content. He was always happy, he was never depressed. Given his situation of, where he was, and, even just thinking to myself, sometimes when I got sick or, injured something, I was like, this is nothing to compare to what my father has to go through, and which helped me kind of just get myself up and keep moving forward. That's the kind of example he set even then, to just keep going, because what he was going through, it was nothing to what anybody else had to go through. I'll always be grateful for my father. He showed me so much. I was a little bit surprised, I have to admit, that he passed away. That when he did, we had plans to do things, and but I know he's not suffering anymore. I know he's in a place where he's at peace. But like I said, I'll always be grateful. I loved him to death. He's a great father. Thank you so much.
I was going to say one thing about Riverwood. At one point, because it was COVID, no one could visit him, we talked about having more letters and more postcards. I think Ron Damodar was very instrumental in that. He got a bunch of postcards and passed them out. So many letters and so many postcards went to Riverwood that the people said to him, well, who are you? Are you some kind of a celebrity or something? You're getting all this mail and all these phone calls. It was difficult because he couldn't use either of his hands. So someone called, they had to bring the phone. And that became too much for the people to do most of the time. But anyway, like you said, he was a celebrity. I think we're going to hear from one person online. You're going to pop off, and we're going to try to keep the memories as succinct as we can, just because we have a lot of memories and not that much time.
Is it possible I can just get 1 minute,
Yeah, we're going to do our best.
I would like to
Yeah, I'm sure.
say one thing.
Yeah, we'll do our
If
best.
possible.
Okay.
She on Zoom? Here she is, yes. Hey, Nishinga. Hi, Haribo. Can you hear us?
Okay, go, Nishinga.
No, you are
We
not
can't hear you.
Okay, you are not connected audio
Should I have
wise.
someone else go away trying to figure it out, Jonathan?
So
You want me to go?
Just hold on a second, okay, Gary?
somehow something is not, audio wise you are not connected.
I'll have Stubby Harry go while we figure that out, okay, Jonathan? Is that all right? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. There you go. Oh, glory is assembled devotees. So Sarva Satya Prabhu, I didn't meet him until he showed up at the temple in Nu'uanu in Hawaii. And I was a pujari. He would just kind of show up, and at one point he wanted to move into the brahmachari ashram, but it was difficult for him because he only had one arm that didn't work, and we would have had to tie a dhoti on him all the time, and it was difficult for him to wear a dhoti, and somehow he got a pair of yogi pants, so that was easier to put yogi pants on him. But he, although he didn't have one arm, only had one arm, and he couldn't do a lot, but his legs were very powerful, and he had a lot of stamina. So, and a lot of enthusiasm for kirtan. So I remember him coming for the kirtan and artik, and he would just dance wildly like a wild man, and very loud voice above everyone in the room. It could be packed, but you would hear his voice. He was so loud and so sincere, and his dancing would just be wild and spin and dancing. And I remember one time he just got so enthusiastic that he passed out. And I had to drag his body out of the temple room because he was like right on the floor, and I dragged him out into the foyer, and he was just laying there, and I kind of talked to him, and he came back to consciousness, and I said, "How you doing? Are you okay?" Because I was a veteran, and I knew he was injured as a veteran, and so I felt this kinship with him right away, and I wanted to help him, and he came out of it, and we got back into the temple room, and he calmed down a little bit. But he was always excited to be with the devotees and chant the holy name, and preach as best he could. And I remember him in the morning. He had a book bag, and they would fill it with back to Godheads and small books, and he had a bucket, and the book bag would be on one side, and the bucket would be on the other side, and the bucket had taped lettering on it about Hare Krishna and some other things, and someone would take him to the main gate of Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, and eventually later on I started working there, but he would go to the main gate, and because he was a wounded veteran, they wouldn't bother whatever he did. He would walk out into traffic. There would be hundreds of cars, federal employees, Marines, naval people, in their cars trying to get through the gate. The Marine guards would stop everybody and check their IDs and let them. So there was always a line of cars, like 2 or 3 rows of cars, and he would just walk between the cars in the traffic, and I don't know what he was saying, but all of a sudden hands would come out of cars, they'd throw money at him and fill up that bucket. He would bring in all kinds of Lakshmi every day, and he did this day after day after day, had this big bucket, and they would just throw money in there. And he was fearless, and no one messed with him. The Marine guards didn't mess with him. Normally anybody would do that who, they would just get out of here. You're on government property, but it's like he was part of the government for life. They owed him a debt. He gave, like President Lincoln said, he gave full measure to his country, and he actually told me once that the bodies after that attack were lined up in triage, and he was one that they thought was dead. And one corpsman went down the line, or medic, and noticed that he either blinked his eye or made a noise or something.
He knew him.
Yeah, I heard he knew him.
On
knew.
the same football team.
He knew him from high school, right?
Pensacola,
And he recognized him. And then he went and he felt his pulse, and he said, "We got to get him in now." And they took him in, but he was triaged to be buried, basically. But that man saved his life, and they revived him and did a lot of work. He needed a lot of work. I mean, even though he had just one arm, and that one, his hand barely worked, and the other one's gone. But he went through a lot in his lifetime. I remember one time he said, "Gosta, I got this old car and it doesn't work very good." I think it was called a Gremlin. Is that right? It was on Oahu. A Pacer? They're similar. Yeah, okay.
AMC.
Yeah, and it was on Oahu. And he said, "Gosta, I told the insurance company that somebody stole the car."
Don't tell that.
He needed Lakshmi, so
It's incriminating.
hey, it's ancient history. So I said, okay, anything for you, Sarva. And I hooked it up to my truck, and I drove it to the west side of Oahu, right in broad daylight, got all the way out there, and I pushed it off a cliff. And then I took a big lava rock and I smashed the back window. And then the insurance company found out the police had found it, and they pulled it out of the ditch, and it was a total, it was total. So he got a big check, from the insurance company, and he needed that. And then I said, I'll do it. I risked going to prison, but I said, hey, for Sarva, I'll do whatever I can, But he, yeah, it's not recommended. But he was always like so loyal and so generous. When my wife and I were thinking of moving here, we would go and visit with him and Marcia, and they would always invite us in and feed us. And if we had to spend the night, they had a room, we could sleep there. And then we go back to Georgia, because I was working a naval base up there, as was she. And they were like the best friends we had here at the time. And he was loyal to the nth degree. If you were his friend, anything you needed, he could try to help you with. And I felt the same way. And so, I salute him. He's a great soul.
Thank you, Mr. Harry. Everybody wants a friend like Sarva. It's really nice. Should Maha Shapir go next, or can you get somebody online? Should I have Mahavisha go down there?
Okay, it's not working for her, so she's going to type in something in the messages and we'll read it for her.
Yeah, but we are unable to hear them.
Just pull it down.
So you can go on to the next one because the mic is not working.
I was initiated in 1975, November 7th, with Sarva Satya and Purana Rishi, and Godrum Das got second initiation. There were 5 others besides the 3 of us. And Sarva was a person who was so unique as an individual that once you met him, he was unforgettable. He had, as others have said before, he had a very loud voice, and he was always enthusing us in kirtan. He would yell out, "Hurry, hurry!" or "Chaitanya, Chaitanya, Jai Prabhupada," and everybody, it would be lift the whole kirtan, and we all became more and more ecstatic, and he was I don't know, like a dynamic, but yes, he was
Instrument of Lord Chaitanya.
Yeah, I mean, he was so inspirational, and we loved having him there in the kirtans. So let's see. The next thing I wanted to mention was he was very dedicated to his service, and he went out, as my husband mentioned, collecting money every day, passing out BTGs and small books. He did this diligently, and he put his whole heart into it, and people reciprocated. It was incredible. Could see him. I remember him standing in the medians of big highways and just walking, you know, with if the traffic light had everybody stopped, he'd just be walking, and everybody responded to him.
Santa Claus.
What?
Santa Claus.
Yes,
Santa Claus.
that's right. Yeah, he used to wear that. So sometime later, Sarva asked our temple president, which I think was Sukadev at the time, that he wanted to get second initiation. And Sukadev said, well, I'm going to have to think about that. Why don't you ask our GBC? So our GBC was Guru Kripa Maharaj at the time, who lived in Japan, who had the Namahata boys, and he would come to Hawaii 2 or 3 times a year. So Sarva had to wait for Guru Kripa to arrive. And Guru Kripa, when he talked to him, he said, absolutely not. There is no way you can be a Brahmin. You can't do this. And Sarva was very disappointed, but he thought that can't be right. It doesn't feel right to me. It feels so. Shortly after that, Srila Prabhupada arrived. And so he went to Srila Prabhupada and he asked, could I get second initiation from you? And Srila Prabhupada said, absolutely you can. There is no impediment to advancing in Krishna consciousness. There's nothing that can hold you back. If you're sincere and if you're determined, Krishna consciousness is yours. So I love that story. So years later, as my husband already mentioned, Kunti and Sarva were very hospitable to us. We were looking at the community, and we were thinking about purchasing some land, and they opened their hearts and their homes to us. Kunti was always cooking and feeding us, and we stayed in the spare bedroom, and it was wonderful to be in the Association of Devotees. Both of us worked for the military, and we had a lot of military folks to deal with. And they were doing the ISKCON World Review. They were publishing it. And so that was their service. Anyway, I think I mentioned everything. I just want to think of him as one of the most unforgettable people in my life. I'm glad that he was there. I'm glad that he set such a wonderful example of what a Vaishnava is. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have a shoot for you. Prana Rishi? You want to say something?
Yes or no?
Go ahead. We'll take the yes. Should I bring the microphone to you? Yeah. All right, well, tell me.
I will say that his grandmother was opera singer.
Sarva's grandmother was an opera singer.
Wow.
Okay, so she got the loud voice. Okay, thank you, Prana, for that. Write it down at her. You want to speak?
Nimai's online.
Oh, Nimai's online. Okay, then Niku after that. Okay, write it down there? Go ahead.
Hare Krishna. Can everyone hear me? Yes? Hare Krishna. So, what to say about Sarva? I knew Sarva since Miami Temple. I guess I was about 4 or 5 years old. Sarva and Kunti. And when I come back from Gurukul, from Lake Huntington, I would stay with my mother. She ran the gift shop there, and Sarva and Kunti lived upstairs. This was actually before they adopted KD. Anyway, Sarva would show me the Mahabharata, and he always had that warrior spirit and always encouraged that in me, maybe a little too much. Later on, when I got out of Gurukul, when the Gurukuls closed down, we were all in San Diego together, and Sarva and Kunti were running ISKCON World Review, and they just started, Sarva wanted to start a Boy Scout troop, and he chose me as the senior patrol leader, and we had a dysfunctional little group. It was myself and Krishnadas and Neela and Patita Pavan, Nagaraja's son, Jairam, bunch of boys, but Sarva was very enthusiastic and encouraged us to go backpacking. He would go right along with us. He taught us all kinds of things: how to survive in nature, how to survive, build campfires. It was actually some really amazing training to get from somebody that had that level of experience. Sarva was like a father to me. My father was in prison at the time, and Sarva guided myself and KD and Neela, and whenever we got in a lot of trouble, which was quite often, he would steer us straight. And everyone kind of knew what it was like when Sarva lost his temper, so you never really wanted to see that. He would, I remember he'd swing his one arm at us, kind of wild. But he was a very loving man, and being with Sarva and Kunti was like a second home whenever we were over there. He was just so kind. When I really had some difficulty as a teenager, he'd give me these very encouraging and heavy lectures to set me straight. Anyway, he will be loved for many, many years. Thank you, Sarva. Hare Krishna.
And my mom raised me as a single mother with me and my daughter, and she worked for Hare Krishna World with Kunti and Sarva for years. And Sarva was like a father to me, like I guess like a godfather, you know. I remember being a teenager and he would have me rake the yard on the weekends just so I'd have like a job and like, you know, put the young teenagers to work. And he was always motivating us to do good. And not just me, lots of people in this community. Multiple people who I'm waiting on, I was hoping to see here today, around my age. Kirtan, Raja, I mean, Gromashringa, I mean, so many of us. Sarva was like a role model. And I mean, everyone knows that, I mean, he was tough as rocks. I mean, you can't go through what he went through and not be hard as steel, but at the same time have a warm heart and only care for the better people around him. And even though he got taken advantage of so many times by so many people, he was always hoping that people would like change and be better. And honestly, Sarva was probably one of the best role models that I've ever had. And, you know, just with my mom working there, I would come over all the time and just, you know, eat lunch and snacks, and he'd put me to work and this and that. And, you know, he helped shape a lot of the kids in this community. And he will truly be missed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Salvador, should we just go ahead with people here that are here? Who?
Hare Krishna. Hopefully you can hear me. Just want to thank you all for allowing this to happen. I'm really glad I was able to zoom in here. So just briefly, just for context, and as much as I hate talking about myself, I think context is important in general. So my name is Jai Chaitanya, and when I met Sarva, I was 17 years old, 16 years old, back in the mid 90s, and you know, I was going through a tough time with my own identity as a devotee, just a person in the world, and as many have said already, you know, he really was the person that I needed at the time, and definitely a father figure. But one of the best things about him, when I met him, you know, I was still going by a Karmi name and kind of confused about my identity, and he insisted on always calling me Jai, which at the time was a little bit annoying to me, but it kind of grew on me, and I really appreciated it. And I was able to look back many years later and really, I thought about him a lot over these years, and I really wish I had time to come down there, the means to get down there again. But you know, just the exposure to the computers and learning Photoshop at the time, Photoshop 3, my God, you know, it was great to kickstart in my early career and everything else. But it just meant so much to me. You know, he just let me stay there for the entire summer. I was living up in Pennsylvania, and he didn't know me. He didn't have any reason to offer me anything, but he just said, "Yeah, come down, stay here for the whole summer." I got to work there at his Commonwealth Review and learn lots of stuff, and I appreciated it so much. And I just want to thank him and thank all of you who put this together. And Jai Prabhupada for him. Thank you.
We couldn't hear Nimai Prabhu, so please go again.
Thank you so much, Jai Chaitanya.
Jai Chaitanya is some Jamini who wrote so many songs for the Gurukula, and he used to come visit me in my house. And he'd come to Mangalarti on a bicycle, even when he was 16. You know, he's a very solid guy. So I have good memories.
Jai, you gonna speak? You?
I think Nimai's going to speak next.
Can you hear me? Hare Krishna. So trying to repeat it again. Sarva was my superhero. I don't know when I met Sarva and Kunti. I remember them as far back as the Miami Temple, probably 5 or 6 years old. I was sent to Lake Huntington Gurukul from there, and I'd come back on vacation and hang out with my mother and the devotees at the old Vaikuntha building. And Sarva, he was one of the few devotees that had a television, so he'd show me the ITV movies of the Mahabharata and stuff, and get me all excited about being a warrior. I remember when they first adopted Krishnadas, and we became friends and started hanging out and at the Miami Temple. And then years after the Gurukuls closed down, somehow or another, everyone ended up in San Diego. And ISKCON World Review was in San Diego with the BI and everything before everyone moved to Alachua. And Sarva decided to start a Boy Scout troop. And he, for whatever reason, he named me senior patrol leader. And we were a Hare Krishna Boy Scout troop, myself, Krishna Das, and Neela Madhava, Patita Pavan, and a bunch of the boys here in San Diego. And Sarva would take us out, fully go for it. We'd go backpacking for days. He taught me how to build fires, how to survive in the wilderness. He'd say really heavy things like, I remember him clearly saying, we're devotees, we're vegetarian and everything, but if you have to see that lizard right there, you have to just eat it. And it was it was intense, but that was Sarva for sure. 100% intense all the time. I used to love how excited he'd get in kirtan. Even one of the last times I saw him in kirtan, I remember I was playing mridanga and I turned around and Sarva was rocking his whole wheelchair and just waving his arm and just screaming. And it's something you loved about him, his energy. He would do that in San Diego too. Me and the boys would come back from surfing and you knew you were getting near Sarva's house. He'd be out watering the roses, just screaming at the top of his lungs the Maha Mantra for the whole neighborhood to hear. He just had that wonderful energy. And he really, I don't know how many of us Gurukul boys could really not thank Sarva. He mentored so many of us and saved a lot of us from trouble. He really put up with a lot. We went to I took all the boys to a concert when we were all probably like 15, myself and Krishna Das, and well, we got in a bunch of trouble that night, and we got back home, and the next day, Sarva had Katie shaved up again, and I wasn't really ready for that, but that was Sarva for sure. He just, he took the place of my father. My father was in prison at the time during my teenage years, and Sarva would give me all the heavy lectures I needed. Try to stay on the straight and narrow. And of course, Kunti, Sarva and Kunti together were like a super team, doing ISKCON World Review and taking care of the devotees in the community, looking out for all the teenage boys. It just was an amazing couple, power couple. And, Sarva, I could say so much about him for years and years. He just put up with me and kept encouraging me to keep going forward and do better, try harder, never give up. If anyone, when he was at the Miami Temple, he was still, his other arm was still in relatively good shape. And then he got in a bike accident. If I remember correctly, it was a bicycle accident and it ruined his other hand. And, but he really showed us, just never give up, never give up. Yeah, our bodies, he would always quote the Gita, these useless bodies we can give up, do our best, fight the fight. He always spoke like a warrior. And I'll forever be indebted to Sarva Satya. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Damodar, should we do another online, or should Radha Damodar go now? Okay, Radha Damodar, thank you. Radha Damodar is famous for helping devotees who are disabled, sick, and just really being a steady person that does that kind of service.
Much of what you said so far is just things I was going to say anyway, so I don't want to repeat all those, but I had Sarva Satya about 93 to 96 or so. When I first came here, I worked at a daily discount, but when that folded, I was dependent upon 8 part-time on-call jobs for some years before I got a regular job again. And one of those was working at Sarva Satya's rose garden. He had very large rose bushes, big yard full of them, very aggressive. He used to grow them for the temple here. And so I used to pick these roses and spray them and other things. And at that time, Prahlad was also working. My middle son was working there on the ISKCON World Review and learning the computer skills that he's still using it today, that desktop publishing and computer is using graphic arts and things. And he has such a resume from doing this and he was very proud to see, Prahlad was very proud to have his name. He was just a young boy, maybe 14 or so, have his name on the masthead of the ISKCON World Review. And when we went to Santa Fe College to get him into dual enrollment, they were so impressed with all the knowledge on his resume and the portfolios he had that they jumped him over 67 people to get him right into dual enrollment. And then he's still in computers today. And Carr was also, my elder son was also there all the time. About 5 or 6 of the young men had formed a very loud rock band called Cully that Sarva Satya let practice in his shed, and also taught them much about life on the road. And they became, somewhat successful as a rock band. And Sarva, helped us so much. And of course, the boys stayed there a lot. And he fed them and looked after them and talked to them and enthused them and kept them in Christian consciousness. These were young men, 18 years old or so. And then when Sarva Satya, when I had been visiting devotees in prisons and nursing homes and other places for a while, and then I heard that Sarva Satya was in Lake City, VA, but he wanted to move up here to get more association, so he moved up to the Gainesville VA, which is right next to Shands where I worked, so I could visit there a couple times a week. I visited that nursing home, and then also Park Meadows, and also met his father there. And he was also a patient in Park Meadows. I looked just like him. He was almost 100 years old. As the colonel or something, wasn't he? Colonel?
No.
Something? He looked just like me, yes.
Almost 97.
Yeah, 97, yes. And I would visit in Park Meadows. It's a terrible place because it was just near my work, and just visiting Sarva Satya. He always said that every time I visited, it's just like Christmas, he said. And we would read from any book, and we would both comment upon it, and he'd have garlands and prasadam, and I always brought a lot of posters and pictures for the counters and plastered every inch of his room with them. And when he moved from room to room, I'd do it again. And then so we visited there for some years, and then he moved to Riverwood. I continued to visit with Vrindavan Leela. Drove up to Riverwood once a year. So about 2019, as I saw. But Sarva Satya had told me some stories about his military days like that, and he also told me a story how in Hawaii he was. I was looking out his window and saw that he was always dropping his beads. And he says, who is that out there dropping his beads? Bring it to me. And Madhavisa Swami brought him up, and Prabhupada said, why are you dropping your beads? He said, Prabhupada, my hands doesn't work very well. I can't hold on to them. I need bigger beads. And Prabhupada says, I have such beads. And he gave me these very large beads, about 4 feet high, really, really huge beads, and Sarva Satya was channeling for years. He showed me those beads. And also when I moved to Riverwood, he told me that all these years he'd always chanted 16 rounds. He would wait till after lights out, when not bothered so much by nurses, and he would have a clock in front of him. He would chant for at least 2 hours aloud. And so he always chanted 16 rounds like that. I also gave him an MP3 player, but he says the nurses would often turn it off when they came in and not turn it on again. He'd have to call many times to get it turned back on. I used to speak to the doors that they should see what nursing homes are like. It's quite an experience. It really gets you afraid of old age and death and things. It's just so words can't describe. Once you actually visit the boys in such a situation, yes. And but Sarva Satya was always very happy and upbeat, yes. And it was always nice to see him and talk with him. And he's unique. We'll never find a story like that again. But I don't have much else to say, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Radha Damodar, for making his Christmas come so many times in his little room. And next, we're going to have Nishinga pop-offs. We couldn't hear before, but we should be able to hear now. And she lived here for many years, Nishinga pop-off. Her sister was here. I guess she's not here now. Is she here? Okay.
No, I cannot hear you. Madhurya Leela, can you hear her? No. Okay, Damodar, can you hear her? No.
Okay.
All right. Madhurya Leela, can I read? All right. Okay, so here, I'm going to read. Damodar, can you hear me? I'm going to read what she had written, Narasimha had written. So she says, Sarva was the stability for myself and my family. For many years, he won't be forgotten. He did so much for everyone he came across. He was a prisoner in his body, in his material body. And it was just time Lord Krishna wanted him back. So it was finally time. He is in a better place now. One thing he always told me was, keep chanting Hare Krishna. And so I always do that. My apologies on my computer difficulties. So I'm sorry if I didn't do a good job as you would have done it. So thank you. So is next Sesha Prabhu?
Oh, yeah, she can hear us.
Can she hear us?
I don't think so.
Who's Sesha?
See you.
We see Sesha.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Namo Vishnu Krishna Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Chari Abhishek Sunyavadi Vasyachite Sata. Can I be heard?
Yes.
I just wanted to say a few words of appreciation for everybody who has spoken here today. It's created a loving, full picture of someone who dedicated their life many times, dedicated their life to the family, dedicated their life to friends and young people, dedicated their life to their country, dedicated their life to Srila Prabhupada. As has been said by other speakers, rarely will you find such a person as Sarva Satya Prabhu. For me, all the feelings that have been aroused today have been captured when Ghost Bihari gave his final salute to Sarva Satya. As he's passed on to a better place, may he not forget us when he looks back at everyone that he affected so deeply in this world. Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Shashi, for this so much. Ramanya? You want to speak? Unless you have, do you have someone else to speak or should?
Yes,
Okay, then you'll go after.
Okay, so, can I go now? I'm sorry,
We can hear you, please go ahead.
Okay. But there's a Hare Krishna. My name is Vaishnavi Dasi. We moved to Alachua in 2001. We met Sarva Satya Prabhu many years later in a nursing home. He was already in a nursing home. And he's shared several of his, he said many things in one of the meetings we had with him. One of the funny things he said was that whenever they used to chant, they had a dog in his house would also bark the whole 2 hours along with him. So he said one of the sannyasis, this is some time like maybe 22 years back story. So a sannyasi at that time who was staying with Sarva Satya Prabhu had actually initiated the dog by sprinkling some water. I don't know what name he gave, but there is a dog, initiated dog somewhere in Alachua. So, and another story he said was, he knew when they got initiated because he was one of the first 10 disciples of Prabhupada, I think, if I remember correctly. He said they knew that they had to memorize, and I don't think he understood what needs to be memorized. So he went ahead and memorized all the purports in Bhagavad Gita. So he actually knew the whole Bhagavad Gita verbatim from, wrapper to wrapper. So I think he also knew Krishna book verbatim. He memorized Krishna book, whatever book that came when he was initiated, he just memorized everything. And another thing he shared, this he said about 11 years back. So he said at that time, 11 years back, he said several years back, he had a dream. And in the dream, he said the future of ISKCON, he saw in the future of ISKCON, there were several female Diksha gurus. I don't know how. Anyway, and he shared few other things. So I thought this is all I could remember. I'm sorry, I did not have everything written down, and it's just on top of my memory. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Vaishnavi. Okay. Turn this on.
Thank you, Tom. Hare Krishna. Is it working okay, Dominic?
You can hear it.
When
This is Ramya speaking.
Go ahead.
Remain speaking.
Panchakopadrubhisa Kibasanive Vichapatinam Pavani Vavaishnanam. My name is Ramia, so in case you don't know me. I first met Sarva Satya Prabhu in the early 90s, and at that time I was involved with the Prabhupada Centennial for 1996 celebration, and he was very much focused in on that celebration. And I'd have to say, in my opinion, he was one of the reasons I moved to Alachua, because then I could work very closely with him. And thinking back, it seemed to me that it was because of all the space and energy he put into it that Prabhupada Centennial was so well known and so enthusiastic around the whole world. So it was always a great pleasure to work with him. He was very unique, I would have to say, but he was such a warm, friendly devotee, and he was always 100% a Prabhupada man. And I think that was the reason he was so helpful with the Prabhupada Centennial. He and Kunti worked very closely, putting together, getting issues out, sending them all around the world. It was quite a marathon. And, because his mood always trying to serve Prabhupada, I'm sure that he's with Prabhupada now. Sarva Satya Prabhu Ki Jai.
Thank you, Neil, so much. Ganga Jamuna is going to speak nice and, excuse me? Oh, Ganga Varuni.
No problem. Hare Krishna, everyone. I'm Ganga Varuni. I started working over there. By the time we were working there, it was called Hare Krishna World. I was 24, so it was like 20 years ago when I did that. And first we started in Sarva and Kunti's house, and the atmosphere was very fun and laughter and jovial and lots of people around, and Sarva is such a character and very fun. He made me laugh a lot, really funny and saying wild things all the time. And then after some time we moved to the back of the temple here, and then it ended after that. But I'll tell you a story that Sarva told me at the back of the temple here when we were sitting in an office room together. He would just say crazy, funny, hilarious, outrageous things a lot. At least when I knew him, he was like that. And so one time he told me, he was talking so loudly and just like talking for a long time, and he told me that he was a dog in his last life and he urinated on a tulsi plant, and that's why he had to have what he had in this life. And I was just listening to him for a long time, I was young and I was like, really? Is that true? And he told me the story, and if you can corroborate any details, if my understanding is wrong, but he told me, so he had a one hit, like a musical hit, right? He was a star for a little minute in New York City, right? Was it? It was more than that. So I don't know what it was, but he had a top of the charts.
He was running with the mamas and the papas, and his band was the blues.
So he had musical success. Yeah, he had top of the charts. I did not know how many. And at that time, he met Srila Prabhupada, and he was attracted, but not so much attracted to join at that time. He was really handsome and young and at the top of his game, right? Like really charismatic, and I guess his grandmother, I just learned his grandmother was, I see, didn't know that part. So he was really living large and doing very well. I saw a picture of him from that time. He was incredibly good looking, very strong, handsome man. And now I found out his grandmother was an opera singer, so he must have had a very good voice. He probably had a very sonorous voice, I imagine. And he met Srila Prabhupada, and they had a conversation, and I don't know what it was. And then skip forward to so many years in the future, Sarva was on the plane going to Vietnam, and Srila Prabhupada came and happened to be that his seat was right next to Sarva. He was assigned that seat, and Srila Prabhupada came and sat down next to him. And Sarva told me personally that Srila Prabhupada started the conversation with Sarva at the exact moment where they had left off their previous conversation. Like, he did not act as if, like, he had every memory of everything they said, even though some time had passed, like several years, I think. And Srila Prabhupada acted as if no time had passed. He completely remembered him, remembered everything they talked about, and started the conversation there. And Srila Prabhupada told him, don't go to Vietnam.
How do you remember that conversation?
And he maybe even told him twice, don't go. And Sarva, you know, strong-headed, whatever, I am also, I'm not. So Sarva went, and he told me that, he told me about what happened to him, that he was tortured. He told me details of that. He said that he was in Cambodia when President Nixon announced on the television, we have no prisoners of war in Cambodia. And Sarva was there. He said, they weren't telling the truth. So he told me details of how he escaped, that he was chained with other men and they were running, and there were soldiers in front of him firing and soldiers behind him firing, and they did not know if the soldiers in front of them were helpers or foes. And a missile came and hit them, like really extremely dramatic, like things that I could never endure myself. Like, he was a military man. And he told me that, like I said already, that it was as if he was dead. And they thought he was dead, he was unconscious, they thought he was dead, and then he started moaning, and that's what he told me, that someone figured out he wasn't dead.
Yeah, we
So
heard the whole story.
he got saved, all right. And so Sarva was good and kind and friendly with me only, and funny and nice, and like everyone already said, very encouraging and motivated, and big booming voice to say nice things. It's really nice to hear how many, teenage boys he mentored, boys really need that. And that was his amazing association with Srila Prabhupada. So, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Bharani.
Pushkar, do you want to speak?
Okay, so Varuni reminded me of that when I just do glimpses and anecdotes. I'm not really doing chronology here, but I had an art book come out in '97, and I also had gone to India to do to present a picture that they would make a stamp. They made a stamp out of this picture, so I forgot somehow. I got an intuition. I used to advertise in the World Review. This is '97, and before that too, but '97. So I had this stamp come out, and Kunti was also involved, and you suggested we send a floppy disk. Maybe Sarva and you both, but so I'm really thinking it was a great thing, because sent this floppy disk to about 8, 6, 7 newspapers around, and 2 of them responded. Wow, I thought that's great. It was the local Gainesville Sun and the one in Jacksonville, which is like 4 times bigger. And I got like on the front page of I ended up on the front page of the Gainesville Sun, and there was a big picture of me inside, and another one in this Jacksonville paper. It was all due to, I say, Kunti and Sarva's smarts, and so in the mode of PR and why don't you send that, And I was thinking, wow, I never thought that'd be a great idea, and it worked, and it was featured it. So I have to thank the World Review era for that. And I remember Sarva sitting in the back. He told me one time when we were putting in the marble here, I wasn't putting in the marble, but the marble was being laid. He said, no, marble's no good, marble's really bad. You jump on the marble, it's really bad for your legs. You're going to mess up everybody's calves and all that. You need some give in the floor. He was really good into it. He had an opinion, Of course, Kunti knows real well, but if the news was on, he wasn't like a right-wing guy or anything, but if there was some guy on there He didn't like some right-wingers usually, and he would scream at the TV, right? Just so loud, and I was like, wow. And, or the football game, there's something going on, and he was rooting for some side. It was loud, and he would sit in the back there. It's not that far in the back, but I remember standing here or something, and he would yell, "Arr!" It was like, wow. It was like really a heart cracking almost, you know. It was like so heavy duty, his voice. You can't even imagine. I mean, you know, we hear some people loud, but no, it was really, just not just loud, but just solid and loud and really heavy. It roared. No, like, wow, what's that? That's I don't think if you had big giant earplugs you could stop that. It would just penetrate right there. One time, I remember you guys hosted a one of these ISKCON rock bands. Was it 108 or Shelter? They were playing at your place. I could hear them at my house, like 2 miles away. Said one of those bands was up there.
We had the Ghost Brothers in town.
Oh, I don't know about that, but so I used to advertise pictures there, and so I was giving them like what, $25 every few months we'd come out. But then it got to be where there was internet, and you know, the news was like coming out every day, and then, or we'd hear about some news, and the World Review news would be like 2 months old or something. So all publications, I guess, they get left behind nowadays. And I was impressed with Gunga, I have to say, when she took over the World Review. How long did you last on it?
13 years.
Yeah, but she took it over for like,
Yeah, well, yeah.
I mean, I had to admire, she was inspired by, I guess, Sarva and Kunti to do that, keep it going, and it was amazing.
She kept it going 15 years.
Is it a rumor that he used to do flips in the temple? Did you ever see him do a one-arm handspring? It was a rumor.
Did he do it?
I don't know, I've heard, you know, I hear a lot of things.
No.
He had one hand. No, no way, right? Okay.
He'd spin around.
He'd spin.
All right, so,
Let's not overdo it, people.
I used to come only, after a while, I would just come to the gate, because I don't like dogs, you know, the dog would, no, it's like, nah, I'm not into dog. Kunti would have to come out and get my money, my advertisement. Okay, so I don't have the unbelievable, unlimited memory. I just remember it being a really good thing, World Review, and before that, there was some other people doing it, but they kind of faded away. I remember them
Nandini
knowing.
and Uddhava did it for like 3 or 4 years.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so who's next?
Thank you,
Anyone?
Vishkar. Radha Krishna was going to speak next.
Radha Krishna Pranama Shugala Kishore.
Hare Krishna. I first and Sarva and Kunti's house is where they hosted us. So they just, you know, they opened their house to some traveling devotees who needed a place to stay for a week, and that's where we stayed. And I didn't really get to know Sarva very well at that moment, at the time, because you know, he was really busy with this kind of World Review and things. But I do remember coming to the temple every day, and he was in the kirtan, and he was in the back, and he was, you know, really enthusiastic devotee at that time. And then years later, we moved here in 2013, and one day my wife came home and said, I'm helping this devotee, she does home care, and why don't you come and meet him? So I said, yeah, sure, why not? So I went and met him, and that was Sarva. And we became friends, and he needed a little more help than what the nursing companies were giving him. So I ended up helping him in the evening, cooking for him, and putting him in bed, and taking him to different, you know, appointments and whatnot. So we became close friends. And I saw also, like everybody else said, is that he was very friendly and giving. Constantly people were coming to his house in need of different things, or shelter, or money, or whatever it was. And Sarva was always accommodating. He was a very kind and a loving person like that.
And so he went to the hospital. I think he was in the hospital or in a nursing home for a short period of time, and he left the heater on in his house. And it caught a fire in the house, and the house didn't burn down, but it had smoke damage. And so they needed to repair that, and nobody could live in it at the time. So he ended up moving into my house for, I don't know, a month or two, something like that. And I look back and kind of funny because he got sick. That wasn't funny, but he got sick, and so he had to go to the hospital. And he was in the hospital about a week, and this private ambulance brought him home. And they opened the door, and I looked at him, and he didn't look better. You know, he looked really like, you know, still sick. So I went up to Sarva and said, "Are you okay, Sarva? You ready to come home?" He says, "No, I'm not feeling good. I want to go back to the hospital," but they didn't want to let me stay. I said, "You're sure about this?" He says, "Yes." I went to the driver and I said, "Hey, look, you got to take him back to the hospital." And he says, "I can't do that. They told me to drop him off, and that's what I have to do, drop off." So I went back to Sarva. I said, "Look, this guy is refusing to let you, go back to the hospital." So I said, "I got an idea." So I went up to the driver and I told him, "Look, you can't drop off here. This is my house. I own this property. I don't want him here." So they were forced to take. So he got all paranoid. He called his supervisor in the hospital and whatever. They said, "Okay, finally, bring him back to the hospital." So I had to use that ploy just to get him to go back to the hospital. So yeah, he was quite a character. I was going to say something else, but anyway, I loved him dearly. I visited him about maybe 3 weeks before he passed away. And at that time he was sick, a little bit sick. We brought him prasadam from the temple, and we brought him a maha garland, and we brought him some pictures. But it was the first time I ever seen him where he didn't want to eat. We brought him prasadam, and we said, "Oh, we got prasadam," because every time I would visit him, he'd have me feed him, right out of whatever I brought in, and I'd feed him right there. But this particular time, this last time I saw him, he says, "I don't feel good, I can't eat." So I said, "Okay, I'll give it to the nurse, and they'll put it in the refrigerator, and they'll eat later." So I said, "Okay." And he said, "I don't feel good. Maybe you should leave, because I don't want to get you sick." So when we drove away, we kind of had this intuition that, he was at kind of the end. We could see that, and actually I felt good for him in a sense, because I'd watched him for those 10 years that I knew him, because when I first met him, he still could walk and he still could take care of himself to some degree. We would go to the grocery store every now and then, and he would push the the grocery cart around, and then sometimes he would sit on the electric chair, but he was still able to go out. But at the end, again, the last 4 or 5 years, he was bedridden. So, I slowly kind of saw him go from, capable of taking care of himself to where he was just laying there. And when I left the hospital, I said, or the nursing home, I said, it looks like he's ready to go, and I really hope that, he can leave his body, because, he was suffering so much. But, Sarva,
just remind me, he used to walk all the way down Balavanta's Road, about a 9-mile walk. And walk all the way around. 235, back to 239. I don't remember how often.
He even had special shoes made for him, that? Special shoes that made him so that he could walk. I actually went and got a couple of pairs for him. The different, podiatrists, or I guess
Did you say Sarva used to walk that route?
Yeah, he used to walk all the way down.
He got the special shoes from the
I
hospital.
don't know how many times he did it. I used to say, "Wow, I don't know how you do it. That's a long walk for you."
8 or 9.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to comment one thing about your whole story and everything. It was always a pleasure merging into 441 traffic with Sarva.
If there anybody else have anything they'd like to share, thank you everyone for coming. We can see Sarva was a material hero, a spiritual hero, and we're just also happy for him to be in the loving embrace of Srila Prabhupada and Lord Krishna. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. I also just wanted to say that our teak starts at 4 o'clock, and that 5:15, then the prasadam will be available. Out here, they'll have plates already made, or if you want to go on the line, you can do that. But it's going to be a very special feast. KD was very generous, wanting to honor his dad, and so please try to stay for that if you can. Thank you so much, KD. And Quinty, for coming. Okay, KD wants to say something.
I just want to thank everybody for all the memories that you shared about my father. Definitely reminded me of a lot of things as well. So I just, thank you so much for just, having him in your memories. And I'm glad that he touched your lives as much as he touched mine. Thank you so much.